The sun hung like a molten coin over the village of Umu-Olu, casting long dancing shadows across the vast cocoa plantations that stretched as far as the eye could see. In Umu-Olu, life was measured by the sweat of one's brow and the harvest of the season. Among the many workers who toiled under the unforgiving heat was Zainab. She was a girl of 22, with skin the color of rich ebony and eyes that seemed to hold the quiet stillness of a forest pool. Zainab was an orphan, possessing no lands of her own and no gold to adorn her neck. But the villagers often said her heart was a treasure chest that never ran empty. While others grumbled about the dust and the thirst, Zainab worked with a rhythmic grace. But her beauty was not what made the village elders nod in approval. It was her inexplicable kindness. Every afternoon, when the plantation bell rang for a brief respite, Zainab did not rush to the shade of the grand baobab tree to gossip. Instead, she would seek out a withered tree at the edge of the field. Under that tree sat Obinna. To the rest of Umu-Olu, Obinna was a shadow of a man, a nobody. He was dressed in rags that had seen better decades. His hair was matted, and his left leg was twisted and bandaged with filthy gray cloths. He was the crippled beggar, a man many believed carried a curse from the forest spirits. People walked a wide circle around him, fearing that his misfortune might be contagious. Zainab, however, saw what others refused to look at. She saw the weary intelligence in his eyes, and the dignified way he held his head despite his circumstances. On this particular afternoon, Zainab approached him, holding her small clay pot of water and a half-eaten roasted yam. "Hey, Obinna," she said softly, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "The sun is angry today. Make some water." Obinna looked up, his movements slow and pained. "Zainab," he rasped, his voice thick with disuse. "You give too much to a man who can return nothing. You should save your strength for yourself." Zainab smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her face. "Kindness is the only seed that grows even in a drought. Obinna, drink." As Obinna took the water with trembling hands, a sharp, piercing laugh cut through the air. Ngozi and Amaka, Zainab's cousins, strutted toward them. They were dressed in vibrant Ankara fabrics, their wrists clinking with cheap plastic bangles that they wore as if they were diamonds. Ngozi, the elder, fanned herself with a look of profound disgust on her face. "Chai, Zainab," Ngozi shouted, making sure the other workers could hear. "Look at you, beautiful girl wasting her lunch on a broken vessel. Do you think if you feed a crippled dog long enough, it will turn into a lion?" Amaka giggled, covering her mouth. "Maybe she thinks his curse is a secret blessing. Tell us, Zainab, are you planning to marry this beggar so he can teach you how to limp through life? You are an embarrassment to our family name." Zainab stood tall, her eyes never wavering. "A man's worth is not found in the strength of his legs, Ngozi, but in the peace he carries in his soul. Obinna has done nothing to you. Why must you poison the air with your words?" "Peace in his soul?" Ngozi spat on the ground. "Peace doesn't pay for palm oil. Peace doesn't build a house. You're a fool, Zainab. Chief Odogwu is asking about you again. He has 3 wives and more cattle than you can count. Could take you out of this dirt. But here you are, flirting with a man who smells of rotten failure." Obinna looked down at his bandaged leg, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing. "Hey." Zainab reached out and gently touched his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that made the onlookers gasp. "I would rather share a crust of bread with a man of character," Zainab said firmly,
Ow.
"than sit at a banquet with a man who counts his coins while his neighbors starve. Go, Ngozi, your gold cannot hide the bitterness in your breath." Ngozi's face turned a violent shade of red. "Fine, stay with your beggar. But remember this, Zainab, when the rains fail and you are hungry, do not come to our door. You have chosen the path of the wretched, and you shall walk it alone." The cousins marched away, their laughter echoing cruelly. Zainab turned back to Obinna, who was staring at her with an unreadable expression. For a split second, the beggar looked not like a victim of fate, but like a judge observing a trial. "You should have listened to them," Obinna whispered. "I only listened to my heart," Zainab replied, picking up her hoe to return to work. She did not see the way Obinna's eyes followed her eyes, that were no longer weary, but burning with a hidden, golden fire. The shadows of the evening were stretching across the village of Umu-Olu, but for Zainab the darkness seemed to arrive much earlier. As she walked home from the plantation, her body was heavy with exhaustion, her fingers stained with the bitter juice of cocoa pods. She desired nothing more than the cold comfort of a clay floor and a bowl of watery soup. However, as she approached the small compound she shared with her aunt and cousins, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The courtyard was lit by a single, flickering oil lamp. Standing in the center, like a vulture waiting for a carcass, was Ngozi. Beside her stood their aunt, Mama Sarah, whose face was set in a mask of stony fury. At their feet lay Zainab's few belongings, a tattered mat, a spare tunic, and a small wooden box that had once belonged to her mother. "So, the thief has returned," Ngozi shouted, her voice cutting through the quiet of the neighborhood. Zainab stopped, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Thief, Ngozi? What are you talking about?" "I've been at the plantation since the first cockcrow." Mama Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling with a practiced outrage. "Do not add lies to your sins, Zainab. My gold pendant, the one passed down from my grandmother's gone. Ngozi saw you lurking in my room this morning before you left. She saw you tucking something into your waistcloth." Zainab's breath hitched. "Auntie, that is impossible. I didn't even enter the main house today. I dressed in the kitchen and left." "Ngozi, why are you saying this?" Ngozi stepped into the light, a wicked smirk playing on her lips. "I am saying it because it is the truth. We all know why you did it, Zainab. You are desperate. You need money to feed that crippled sorcerer Obinna. You think we haven't seen you? You think we do? And know you've been selling your soul to a man who carries a curse? You stole that gold to buy medicine for a man who is already dead to this village. That is a lie." Zainab's voice cracked, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "I would never touch anything that isn't mine. Obinna has nothing to do with this." "Silence," Mama Sarah screamed, stepping closer and raising her hand. "The village elders already speak of how you disgraced this family by associating with a beggar. And now you bring theft into this house. You have brought shame upon the memory of your parents." At the mention of her parents, Zainab felt a sharp pain in her chest. "My parents taught me honor, Auntie." Honor is something Ngozi wouldn't recognize even if it were draped in silk. The remark was met with a stinging slap. Ngozi had lunged forward, her palm striking Zainab's cheek with a sound like a whip crack. Zainab stumbled back, the taste of copper filling her mouth. "How dare you?" Das hissed, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Are nothing but a parasite. You eat our food and then rob us to pay for your lust for a cripple. Well, no more. Mama, tell her." Mama Sarah looked at Zainab with a coldness that froze the girl's soul. "I will not have a thief under my roof. I will not have a girl who invites curses into my compound. Pack your filth and leave now. Leave."
Us.
Zainab whispered, looking at the dark forest that bordered the village. "Auntie, it is night. Where would I go?" "Go to your king of rags," Amaka chimed in from the doorway, laughing. "Go and sleep in the dirt with your crippled lover. Perhaps his piece of soul will keep you warm tonight." With a sudden burst of violence, Ngozi kicked Zainab's wooden box, skidded across the dirt, the lid popping open to reveal nothing but a few dried flowers and a prayer bead. "Get out!" Ngozi shrieked. "Before I call the village youth to stone you for the thief you are." Zainab stood frozen for a moment, looking at the faces of the people who were supposed to be her blood. She saw no mercy, only a hunger to see her broken. Slowly, with a dignity that silenced even Ngozi for a second, Zainab knelt and gathered her things. Her hands shook as she touched the wooden box, but she did not let out a single sob. She stood up, slung her small bundle over her shoulder, and looked at her aunt one last time. "The truth is like the sun, Auntie. Clouds can hide it for a while, but it will always rise. One day, you will realize that the gold you lost was never as valuable as the niece you just threw away." Zainab turned and walked out of the gate, her shadow disappearing into the swallowing gloom of the Umu-Olu night. Behind her, she heard the heavy thud of the wooden gate being bolted shut, sound that signaled the end of her childhood and the beginning of a journey she never asked for. The path was narrow, and the air was filled with the sounds of the night, the shrill cry of crickets, and the distant howl of a jackal. Zainab had nowhere to go, no light to guide her. But through the tears, her feet knew the way. They led her instinctively toward the edge of the village, toward the small, crumbling shack where the only person who didn't look at her with judgment resided. She was going to the man in rags. She was going to Obinna. The rain began as a whisper, a fine mist that clung to the leaves of the iroko trees, but within minutes it had transformed into a relentless downpour. The sky over Umu-Olu had turned into a bruised purple, and the wind howled through the tall grass like a grieving spirit. Zainab stumbled along the muddy path, her thin floral dress soaked through, clinging to her skin like a second, colder layer of grief. Her small bundle was clutched tightly to her chest, the only remnants of a life that had been stripped away by malice and lies. She reached the edge of the village, where the land grew wild, and the sounds of human laughter were replaced by the rhythmic croaking of bullfrogs. There, huddled against a limestone outcrop, sat Obinna's shack. It was a miserable structure, built of warped cedar planks, rusted corrugated iron, and dried palm fronds. To any passerby it was a heap of refuse, but to Zainab, standing in the heart of the storm, it looked like the only fortress left in the world. "Obinna," she called out, her voice barely audible over the thunder. The door, a heavy slab of wood held by leather hinges, creaked open. Obinna sat on a low stool, the interior of the hut illuminated only by the soft orange glow of a small fire pit in the center. The smoke curled upward, escaping through a hole in the roof, carrying the scent of dried herbs and ancient earth. "Zainab," he said. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded as if he had been waiting for the sound of her footsteps his entire life. Come in from the wrath of the heavens. Zainab stepped inside, shivering violently. Her knees finally gave way, and she sank onto the dirt floor, the tears she had held back in front of Ngozi finally spilling over. She didn't speak. The humiliation of the accusation, the sting of the slap, and the coldness of her aunt's heart crashed over her in waves. Obinna did not move toward her with his usual Cop King limp. Instead, he reached for a clean, albeit faded, piece of cloth and handed it to her. "Dry your face, daughter of the soil. In this house, tears are not a sign of weakness. They are the rain that washes away the dust of other people's sins. They called me a thief, Obinna," she sobbed, her voice muffled by the cloth. "They threw me out like a rabid dog. My own blood. They hate me because I showed you kindness. They think I stole gold to pay for a curse." Obinna's eyes, usually hooded and weary, flashed with a sudden, sharp intensity, a golden flicker that Zainab might have mistaken for a reflection of the fire. "They did not throw you out because of the gold, Zainab. They threw you out because your light made their darkness visible. People who live in shadows cannot stand those who carry the sun in their pockets." He leaned forward. And for the first time, Zainab noticed the interior of the shack was not what it seemed. While the outside was a ruin, the inside was meticulously clean. On small wooden shelves sat oddities, smooth river stones, dried roots tied with golden twine, and a small heavy iron chest tucked into a corner. "I have nothing to give you," Zainab whispered, looking at her ruined bundle. "I sold my mother's earrings to buy you that ointment last week. Now I have nothing." "You gave me your dignity when the world spat on mine," Obinna replied, his voice dropping to a deep, melodic hum. "That is a currency more stable than any gold found in the markets of Lagos. Rest now. The fire will guard you." As the night deepened, the storm outside grew more violent, but inside the hut, a strange peace settled. Zainab lay on a mat of woven grass near the fire. As she drifted into a fitful sleep, she saw Obinna out of the corner of her eye. He was no longer hunched over, sat with his back perfectly straight, his presence filling the small room until the shack felt as grand as a palace. In her half-dream state, Zainab watched as Obinna reached into the small iron chest. He pulled out a stone, not a common river stone, but a jagged piece of earth that seemed to glow with a faint internal amber light. He rubbed it between his palms, his lips moving in a silent language that sounded like the humming of bees. "Why do you stay here, Obinna?" she murmured, her eyes heavy. "You're not a beggar." Obinna looked at her, his silhouette framed by the dying embers. "A king must know his people before he rules them, Zainab. He must know how they treat the lowest among them, for that is the true measure of a kingdom's strength." Was looking for one soul who was not blinded by the glitter of the surface. "I was looking for you." Zainab wanted to ask more, but a deep, supernatural exhaustion pulled her under. For the first time in years, she felt safe. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the world smelling of rebirth. Zainab woke to find a wooden bowl of hot porridge and a single piece of fruit waiting for her. Obinna was sitting by the door, his bandaged legs stretched out, looking back toward the village of Umu-Olu. "They will come for you today," he said, his voice calm. "Ngozi and her greed will not rest until they have stripped you of even your hope. But remember this. You are under my protection now, and the earth itself trembles when a king decides to protect his own." Zainab looked at the crippled farmer and didn't see a beggar anymore. She saw a man whose very words had the weight of mountain stone. She realized that by losing her home, she had found a sanctuary that the rest of the world could only dream of. Next step. Would you like me to move to part 4? The cruelty of the scornful, where Ngozi and the village elders arrive at the shack to humiliate Zainab further, leading to the first subtle hints of Obinna's power. The morning mist was still clinging to the damp earth when the silence of the outskirts was shattered. Zainab was helping Obinna sort dried herbs when the sound of many footsteps and harsh voices reached the shack. Her heart sank. She recognized the sharp, mocking laughter of Ngozi and the heavy, authoritative thud of Chief Odaga's walking stick. Within moments, a small crowd had gathered outside the humble dwelling. Ngozi stood at the front, her vibrant head wrap tilted like a crown of arrogance. Beside her was Chief Odagu, a man whose stomach was as large as his greed, and a few village youths carrying sticks. "Look at this," Ngozi shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at the shack. "The thief has found her palace." A nest of rats for a girl who stole from her own blood. Zainab stepped out, her face pale, but her gaze steady. "I told you, Ngozi, I took nothing. Why can you not leave me in peace?" Chief Odagu stepped forward, his eyes traveling over Zainab with a predatory hunger. "Peace is for the honest girl. Your aunt says you stole a golden pendant. In Umu-Olu, we do not tolerate thieves, nor do we tolerate girls who choose to live in filth with cursed beggars." He turned his gaze to the shack and spat. "This hovel is an eyesore on my land, smells of poverty and bad juju." Obinna remained seated inside the doorway, hidden in the shadows, but his voice drifted out, cold and clear. "The land belongs to the Creator, Chief. You are merely a tenant who has forgotten his manners," the youths gasped. No one spoke to Chief Odagu that way. The chief's face turned a deep, angry purple. "Who said that? Uji-Chu? Crippled man? You dare speak while sitting in the dirt?" Ngozi laughed, a shrill, piercing sound. "Oh, Chief, don't mind him. He thinks he is a man because a foolish girl feeds him. Zainab, show us your bundle. You know the gold is hidden in your rags. Or perhaps," she sneered, "you gave it to him to buy a new leg." Before Zainab could respond, Ngozi lunged forward. Shuta grabbed Zainab's small cloth bundle from a wooden bench and tore it open. Clothes and a few dried flowers fell into the mud. Ngozi kicked through them, her face contorting when she found no gold. "Where is it?" Ngozi screamed, grabbing Zainab by the shoulders and shaking her. "Where did you hide it? Tell us, or we will burn this shack to the ground with both of you inside." Zainab struggled to break free. "There is no gold. Please, stop." One of the youths, egged on by the chief, raised a torch. "Let's see if the fire reveals the treasure." At that moment, Obinna did something no one expected. He placed a hand on the doorframe and dragged himself into the light. He looked pathetic, his leg dragged behind him. His clothes were tattered, but as he looked up at the sun, the air around the shack suddenly grew heavy. The birds stopped singing. A strange, localized wind began to swirl, kicking up dust in a perfect circle around the crowd. "Enough," Obinna said. It wasn't a shout, but the word vibrated in the chests of everyone present. Chief Odagu felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver. He looked down and realized his expensive leather shoes were sinking into the mud, as if the earth were trying to swallow them. Ngozi stumbled back, her breath catching as she felt a sudden, crushing weight on her chest. "You speak of gold," Obinna said, his eyes fixed on Ngozi. "You speak of wealth as if you own the sun. But I tell you this, the gold you seek is beneath your feet, yet you are too blinded by hate to see it. Touch this girl again, and you will learn that the earth has a memory, and it does not forgive those who trample on the innocent." For a second, the dust in the air seemed to glitter like gold dust. The villagers looked at each other, terrified. Even the chief took a step back. "Witchcraft," Ngozi hissed, though her voice wavered. "He is a sorcerer." "Chief, we must leave before he kills us all with his juju." "Shh." Chief Odogu, unnerved by the strange heaviness in the air, pointed his stick at Zainab. "This is not over. You are banished from the market. No one will sell to you. No one will speak to you. You will starve in this hole." They retreated, shouting curses to hide their fear. Zainab collapsed against the wall of the shack, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Obinna reached out and touched her hand. His touch was not cold like a beggar's. It was warm, like a stone that had sat in the sun all day. "Do not fear their hunger," he whispered. "The king is preparing a banquet, and those who mocked the guest will not even be allowed to gather the crumbs." After the clash with Ngozi and the village chief Odogwu, a strange atmosphere enveloped Obinna's small hut. The villagers of Umu-Olu began spreading rumors of bizarre phenomena. They said that every night, amber-colored lights flickered from the dilapidated hut, and the ground around it seemed to shimmer with a strange dust that no rain could wash away. Zainab noticed the change too. She saw that Obinna no longer spent his days sitting dejectedly, although he still looked ragged. Whenever he gazed at the rough black stones he had picked from the nearby stream, his eyes radiated a breathtaking sense of authority. One morning, as Zainab was trying to sift the last kernels of corn for lunch, Obinna handed her a small, worn leather bag. "Zainab, take this to Mr. Abiola's jeweler's shop in the town beyond the forest. Don't go through the village market, and don't let anyone see it," Obinna instructed, his voice low but carrying a strange weight. Zainab curiously opened the bag. Inside wasn't jewelry, but a handful of fine, sandy-colored dust, unusually heavy and warm to the touch. "What is this, Obinna?" she asked, her eyes wide with astonishment. "That's hope, Zainab. That's the reward for your perseverance." Obinna smiled, a smile not like that of a beggar, but like that of someone holding the destiny of an entire land in their hands. Zainab began her journey through the dense forest. Unbeknownst to her, from behind the thick bushes, two tall men in elegant black suits, a completely out-of-place sight in this impoverished countryside, were silently watching her every move through binoculars. "Have you found the rough diamond yet?" someone asked over the radio. "Yes, she's holding the specimen. And His Highness is protecting her." "The plan is nearing completion," the other replied, his voice full of reverence. Meanwhile, at the shop of Abiola, the most skilled jeweler in the region, Zainab timidly placed the leather pouch on the table. As Abiola poured the dust onto the weighing scale, his hands began to tremble. He put on his magnifying glass, his face changing from suspicion to horror, and finally to reverence. "Girl, where did you get this?" Abiola whispered, her voice trembling. "This isn't ordinary gold. This is the purest gold I've ever seen in my 40 years of trading. It comes from the ancient Akure gold mine, one that was thought to have disappeared centuries ago." Zainab stood speechless. An ancient gold mine? Where did Obinna get it from? While she was still reeling, Ngozi had secretly followed her outside. Hiding behind the shop door, her eyes reddened with greed as she saw the glittering gold nuggets on the scales. "That's why that bitch was protecting the cripple," Ngozi muttered, her fingernails digging into the wooden wall. "He's not cursed. He's a living gold mine. And it has to be mine." Ngozi immediately returned to the village and informed the village chief Odogwu. A sinister plot was hatched. They would hold a village purification ceremony to force Obinna to reveal the location of the gold mine and then banish Zainab forever. That night, Zainab returned to the hut, her heart filled with anxiety. She told Obinna what Abiola had said. Obinna simply gazed calmly at the dying fire. "Gold is just dirt to those who don't know love, Zainab. But to the greedy, it's poison." He took her rough hand. "Tomorrow, they will come to find the gold, but that what they will receive will be a truth they cannot bear." At that moment, dark clouds began to gather in the sky above the hut, heralding an impending storm, not a storm of rain, but of judgment for those whose hearts were blinded by greed. The atmosphere in Umu-Olu village today was thick with tension. Village Chief Odogwu and Ngozi had orchestrated a perfect scenario under the guise of a purification and Thanksgiving ceremony. He had erected a lavish banquet tent in the town square, where delicious food was laid out, but in reality it was a humiliating trap for Zainab. Zainab was escorted to the square by the village chief's soldiers. She was forced to wear clothes even more tattered than usual, her hair disheveled. Ngozi stood on a raised platform, wearing her most magnificent Ankara dress, holding a silver goblet. Looking at her cousin with the gaze of a hunter who had cornered his prey. Villagers of Umu-Olu, look carefully, Odagu roared, his voice echoing throughout the square. This girl conspired with a crippled sorcerer to steal our village's fortune, and we found proof she was selling the gold in town. The villagers murmured, their once friendly gazes now tinged with suspicion and contempt. Zainab stood, surrounded, her shoulders trembling, but her eyes remained defiant. "I didn't steal from anyone," Zainab shouted. "The gold belongs to Obinna, and he's not a witch." Kalzi stepped down, her high heels clicking dryly on the ground. She held a bowl of dirty water and slowly poured it onto her gleaming leather shoes. "Oh, poor Zainab. If you want us to believe you, prove your sincerity. Kneel down, wipe this dirt off my shoes, and perhaps I will ask the village chief to reduce the sentence for your crippled lover." "Never." Zainab pursed her lips. A brutal guard kicked Zainab in the back of the knee, sending her tumbling into the mud. Laughter erupted from Ngozi and Amaka. Odagu took a sip of sake, gleefully ordering, "Wipe it off. Wipe it off with your own filthy dress." That's the fitting place for someone who dares betray her own bloodline to follow. A beggar. Zainab felt as if her chest was shattering. Tears welled up, not from physical pain, but from the cruelty of those she once called family. Just as she was being forced to bury her face in Ngozi's shoes, a strange sound echoed from the edge of the forest. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't the limping footsteps of a cripple. It was the powerful sound of a gold-plated wooden staff striking the ground. The crowd parted. Obinna appeared. But he was no longer a ragged beggar. He wore a pristine white silk agbada, draped over a sea-blue velvet cloak. Around his neck were strings of vibrant red coral beads and a solid gold lioness head badge, the symbol of the Akure royal family. The villagers held their breath. Ngozi froze, the silver cup in his hand falling to the ground. Village chief Odogwu trembled, his legs giving way as he realized the powerful men in black suits were respectfully following Obinna. "Shh! Get up, Zainab!" Obinna's voice rang out, deep and warm, yet possessing the power of thunder. Zainab looked up, staring in astonishment at the man before her. Obinna approached, his legs perfectly straight, showing no sign of disability. He extended his hand, adorned with a diamond ring, towards her, oblivious to the mud clinging to his expensive silk sleeve. Prince Obinna." Odagu stammered, falling to his knees, his forehead touching the ground. "We didn't know. We really didn't know who you were." Obinna didn't look at him. He helped Zainab to her feet, gently wiping the mud from her face with a silk handkerchief. He turned to look at Ngozi, his eyes as cold as ice. "He told her to kneel down and polish your shoes," Obinna whispered, but the whole square heard. "Queen would never have to kneel before someone with such a lowly soul as you." At that moment, a convoy of luxurious black SUVs simultaneously started their engines, their headlights blazing directly onto the stage, transforming Odogwa's humiliating party into a judgment floor. The truth had been revealed, and now the price to pay for greed and cruelty was beginning to be served. The village square of Umu-Olu fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the roar of luxury SUVs in the night. The blinding headlights shone directly onto the platform, causing Chief Odagu and Ngozi to squint in alarm. Obinna stood there, tall and imposing in his royal ceremonial attire, his broad shoulders bearing the weight of a kingdom's authority. "Sir, you're not crippled at all?" Ngozi exclaimed, her voice trembling, her lips turning purple with fear. Obinna smirked, a cold smile playing on her lips. "My legs have always been strong, but I needed to feign disability to see who in this village had a crippled heart. And today, I've seen it clearly." He turned to the man in the black suit at the head of the detective team, who was holding a luxurious leather-bound document. "Lawyer Adebayo. Please read the order to them." The lawyer stepped forward, his voice booming through the loudspeakers. "It's in the name of the Akure royal family and the National Mineral Council. Lord Obinna Akindle is not only a prince but also the rightful owner of this entire area, including the ancient gold mine hidden at the foot of the Umu-Olu mountain range. From this moment on, all authority of the village chief Odagu is revoked due to abuse of power, slander, and mistreatment of innocent people." The entire square erupted in a commotion like a swarm of bees. The villagers knelt down, not out of fear, but because they realized they had blindly followed wicked people. Odogwa's face was ashen, and he crawled closer to Obinna's feet, his voice trembling. "Your Highness, I was only instigated by Ngozi. She said Zainab was a thief." "Shut up." Obinna interrupted, his voice sharp as a razor. You're talking about gold? The ancient gold mine Juve all coveted lies right beneath the dilapidated shack you intend to burn down. Zainab protected that mine with her kindness, unknowingly. She shared her last meal with a beggar while you feasted on the suffering of others. Obinna pulled out a rough, black stone, the same one he had given Zainab. In front of everyone, he used a small knife to gently scrape away the outer layer, revealing a solid block of pure gold that gleamed under the SUV's headlights. This is the blood of Mother Earth, Obinna declared. And Mother Earth has chosen Zainab to rule over it. It's for you. He pointed at Ngozi and her aunt's family. You've falsely accused her of stealing gold. Then I will show you what real gold is. Obinna ordered the soldiers to open the trunks of the car. Dozens of chests filled with gold bars and cash appeared. Ngozi, you crave this wealth, don't you? I won't imprison you. But from today, you and your family will have to work in the gold mine under military supervision. You will dig and pan for gold from dawn till dusk, but not a single penny will go to you. All the profits will be used to build schools, hospitals, and houses for the poor you once despised. Ngozi collapsed into the mud. His hands, once used to slap Zainab, now trembling as he clawed at the ground. The most painful punishment was not death, but seeing the person he had once despised become the ruler of the kingdom, while he himself became a servant on the very land he had once been proud of. Obinna turned to Zainab, who was still standing there in stunned silence. His gaze softened, filled with reverence. He knelt on one knee before her, an act that astonished all the guests and detectives. Zainab, you gave me water when I was thirsty, food when I was hungry, and faith when the world turned its back on me. I want to give you this entire kingdom. You're no longer a hired hand. You are the reason Akure's gold mine has been revived. Will you rule with me? Zainab gazed into Obinna's amber eyes, understanding that the trials they had just endured were the work of fate. She held out her hand, accepting the reward for her golden heart. The villagers' cheers echoed across the land, heralding the end of darkness and the beginning of a reign of compassion in Umu-Olu. As time passed, the village of Umu-Olu was no longer a land of poverty and scorn. Under the reign of Prince Obinna and Queen Zainab, the Akure gold mine transformed it into a prosperous kingdom. The dusty roads of yesteryear were paved with stone, and modern schools sprang up, where children were taught that a person's worth lay not in the wealth they possessed, but in the kindness they gave. Zainab never forgets her past. Every week she still dresses in simple clothes and walks to the old hut on the edge of the forest, now preserved as a memorial to compassion. She stands there to remind herself of that fateful rainy night and the power of perseverance. The fate of the wicked served as a costly lesson for the entire region. The village chief, Odogu, was stripped of all power and spent his final days in belated remorse behind bars. Ngozi and his aunt's family, however, continued to work daily in the gold panning area. Whenever they saw the royal procession pass by, Ngozi would lower his head, avoiding Zainab's dazzling gaze. The wealth they once craved was now a heavy burden on their calloused shoulders. They realized that gold could be dug from the earth, but respect had to be built from the heart. The story of the disabled farmer and the girl with a heart of gold has become a legend, passed down through the markets of Nigeria and beyond. The lesson it leaves behind is profoundly insightful. Never judge a book by its cover, and never look down on the weak, because the person you help today may very well hold the key to your future. Always maintain a pure heart amidst a world full of temptations, for destiny has its own way of rewarding pure souls.